Welcome to Calvary Conversations. I'm Mike Dodds. I'm the director of CU Press at Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. And our guest today is Chris Basel, the STEM department chair here at Calvary University. Welcome, Chris, to the conversation.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing fine here on this beautiful day here in Kansas.
Yeah, it is nice.
Hey, I first met you, Chris, way back when. I remember down the hall there in our East Ed building, and you were working for another organization, but teaching science classes for us as an adjunct professor in the evening. Now you're STEM chair. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where have you worked? What kinds of positions? Just get us a little flavor for our department chair.
So when I left graduate school, I went straight into teaching. I taught at a community college for 2 years. And then after that, I got a job up here in Kansas City at a 4-year school. And I was the analytical chemistry professor there. So I taught anywhere from freshman to senior level classes. After 4 years, my oldest son was ready to start school. And there was no way I was going to put him in public school. And I could not pay for Christian school with a teacher's salary. So I left and went to the pharmaceutical industry. And I worked for Bayer Corporation for a little over 30 years. I was a research director there. The first 11 years, I was the manager of the analytical chemistry research. So I had 10 chemists working for me at that time, anywhere from bachelor's to doctorates. And then after 11 years, Bayer decided to move all of my research back to Germany. Bayer is a German company. And so I was left adrift, and my chemists went here and there. But Bayer offered me another job as manager of bioanalytics and pharmacokinetics. And the first thing I did was say just probably what you're saying. Well, what's pharmacokinetics?
Right.
So I took some classes and so forth to learn more about this. But pharmacokinetics is a study of the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination of drugs. So I ran lots of research studies over the years with studying new drugs, drug research, drug development, and so forth.
Yeah, we could maybe ask about all the COVID stuff going on, but we won't go there. I mean, the drugs that are available there.
Yeah. Well, you can always ask.
I'm interrupting.
Yeah. No, that's all right. So I've been, as you noted, I was a teacher to start out with in college, and so I adjuncted here and there. And then at the last several years, I was an adjunct at Calvary and started teaching the science classes. And then in 2019, I transitioned from Bayer over to full-time at Calvary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. So what kind of training have you had? You mentioned you had one course, you have a master's degree. It's in the area of chemistry. Is it just chemistry? And go ahead.
Yeah. My bachelor's and master's degrees are both in chemistry, specifically analytical chemistry for my master's degree. So if you think of these, you mentioned COVID. If you think of these COVID tests, that gives you an idea of what sorts of things that training was in. And then that's what I started with at Bayer. And then, as I noted, when I went to Bayer, they transitioned me to a new area. And, when you look back in life, you can kind of see God at work, because at the time I thought, oh man, what am I doing? I don't know anything about this. And I actually finished a graduate certificate in that. So I have a number of classes in pharmacology to learn that. But what it did, it branched me out. So I used to be strictly chemistry. Then I got more into the biological area. So there's a lot of physiology involved with this, biochemistry and so forth. So I came into Calvary with this background of chemistry and biology. And here I am teaching, like this semester, I'm only teaching biology classes, no chemistry classes this semester. So I'm very thankful that happened, because now here I am, I can do these things at Calvary, and I'm really thankful to be here.
That's cool. You mentioned your faith as a Christian. So let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
In some people's minds, science and Christianity, how the tensions that are there. How'd you come to faith in Christ?
Yeah, good question.
Your
So
testimony.
I grew up my parents went to a social gospel church. Never heard anything about needing a personal relationship with Christ. I never heard about the blood of Christ and so forth. Knew nothing of it. I would have called myself a Christian, but really had no clue about that. I was an evolutionist, and we had science magazines. I loved evolution. It was a wonderful thing, you know. And then at my first job, way out in Southwest Kansas, teaching at a community college, my wife and I went to a church, and they started talking about needing a personal relationship and the blood of Christ and so forth. And all of a sudden, I was really convicted and realized I needed that in my life. And so, at 28 years old, I accepted Christ as my personal Savior. But I have all that background really on the other side, you know, really appreciating evolution. Now, shortly after that, and by shortly, I mean a few years later, I went to a conference where Ken Ham was speaking, and then I got this creation science, and all of a sudden, it all made sense that evolution was a lie, and really everything is based on the foundation of the authority of the Bible. And so since that time, I've been totally I haven't looked back. You know, I'm totally committed to creation science.
So it was like an aha moment, or was it this growing tension, like C.S. Lewis? You know, I came kicking and screaming. It was more the lights went on. This is a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The lights went on. I wouldn't say I was totally committed to evolution after I became a Christian, but you know, during that time, it's like, I don't know what to make of this. But when I heard Ken Ham, he has such a if you listen to Ken Ham, he has such a clear way to communicate.
And Ken Ham is, for those that maybe don't know, they're listening to our conversation. Who's Ken Ham? What's he with?
Yeah, so Ken Ham is the CEO, I believe, is the proper title now, of Answers in Genesis. And so if you've heard of the Ark or the Creation Museum in Kentucky, that's where they are. I believe he was with Institute for Creation Research at the time I first heard him. But he's from Australia, and he's a long, really had a long commitment to spreading the word on the foundation of the gospel. And one of the things about Ken is that he has what he calls the Genesis 3 attack. And I teach this in all of my classes. And so what he looks at is 2 Corinthians 11:3, where Paul is speaking to the Corinthians and saying, I'm paraphrasing here, I'm afraid that Satan is going to deceive you the same way that he deceived Eve. So the question then is, how did Satan deceive Eve? We go back to Genesis 3:1, and he says, did God really say that? Satan did, you know. So it's a questioning of the authority of the Word of God. We've got to have the Bible as our foundation, as the lens we look through everything in order to properly understand the world.
Okay, let me act the role of a person looking at Calvary University. Our history is we began as a Bible college, and not that science wasn't part of it. You know, we had sort of a liberal arts flavor from the beginning, roughly, but we've added a STEM program. Why would Calvary want a full-fledged STEM program? Where does that fit?
Question.
You were hired to start our STEM program, so tell us.
So Ephesians tells us to put on the full armor of God. And the question I ask people, is there a hole in your armor that's labeled science? And so a lot of people shy away from that. So I'm speaking from a broad perspective now, from both a STEM program and for science classes for non-majors. We need to have that full armor of God on, understanding how to reject these naturalistic ideas of evolution. So why start a STEM program? Well, if you look out at the world, we have a lot of things that are science associated things. Evolution is overruns science. and we would like to have scientists that have the true understanding of God's creation and how science should be used. And so if we produce scientists that go out into the science world, they can spread that understanding and be that light in a dark world. And then if you think of people that may go on medical school, for example, they might choose to go into medical missions and so forth. So it's a real need, and we are somewhat unique in that we are a creationist college. We believe in a literal 6 24-hour days. If you go to the Answers in Genesis website, they actually have a listing of creation colleges, and there's only a handful in America. So there are a few others, but not many. So it's much needed to have a STEM program.
It almost sounds like, why haven't we done it, in one sense?
Yeah.
Because we can't segment that part of the world as well as we want. Our mission statement is to equip students to serve Christ in the church and the world, and we need Christians out in the world, especially in a crucial area like this.
That's well stated, Mike. I think I'll adopt that when I talk to my students.
I got it from somebody else too. There is
Okay.
Cool. You bet. What degrees do we offer in the STEM program right now?
So
you started in 2019, so we're still just walking a little bit slowly.
Yes, and COVID slowed us down too.
Yeah.
So we currently have minors in chemistry, biology, and mathematics. And then we have a combined interdisciplinary degree in chemistry and biology. And that could be used, if people want to go on to professional school and in different areas like medical school. This would be a good background, or physician's assistant, veterinarian, and so forth. So we also have these extended degrees jointly with other schools, the PDS program. We have chemistry, biology, and mathematics bachelor's degrees, but we're just starting. So we're getting there, but we've got some interest out there. We've got some good students, and I'm really excited that we're getting a little bit of growth now.
Yeah, and you also have several adjunct faculty that are now working in the department as well. They're doing like what you did before, a career in another place, but yet they're coming and helping out Calvary because of their commitment to a biblical worldview.
That's correct. Yeah, well qualified people. Very thankful for that.
Yeah, cool. A student comes to Calvary, majors in STEM. The perception maybe some people have is, well, you're just teaching a biblical worldview. You aren't exposing them beyond. Now I know you are. How do you help a student to interact not only with the world, and if you could say an evolutionary worldview, like you mentioned earlier, but also the biblical information? How do you equip them to deal with the world when they graduate?
Good question. So let me provide a little background too. There are no current STEM textbooks that are written from the biblical worldview. There may be one or two out there that I've missed, but they don't have the breadth and depth that we need for this degree. So they're using books that are from the secular worldview. Evolution is throughout those books. So that, however, gives us an opportunity to counter that message. And so what I do is I start every student out. In fact, the first every class starts with a couple of videos from Ken Ham. Okay, the Genesis tree attack, which I mentioned earlier, a proper understanding of science, understanding that science in the here and now is experimental observational science. Science looking in the past is historical science. We can't mix those two. Okay, so I'm an observational science. I do science in the here and now. I develop new drugs and so forth. But historical science especially, we look through the lens of our worldview. Okay, so we look at the same things, like bones or something. We look at the same things, but we interpret it differently depending on our worldview. So I teach a lot of that. I make I require the students to write essays. They read articles, watch videos, and so forth from different organizations. Answers in Genesis is one of them. Creation Ministries International Institution for Creation Research. So they got a really good background in that. So they've got their full armor on when they get out of Calvary, so they can refute those ideas. Hopefully they'll bounce off that armor when they get out of here. Yeah.
Okay, so they also read the secular evolutionary stuff to some extent. I mean, definitely an appropriate critique, but they're not just closed in on creation.
Absolutely not. So this is a solid science degree. We use the same books that they use at the secular colleges because there are no other books. So that they need all this information in order to get into graduate school, to get a job, or to go to professional school, and so forth. So it's exactly the same thing. We just add the part. First off, we provide the biblical foundation. That's our authority. And then when we look at different things that come up, it's usually forced. It's always forced into it. Evolution is not needed at all in these books. Actually, when I went to school a few decades ago, I didn't hear anything about it. I'm sure it was more in the biology area, but in chemistry, I didn't.
Yeah, I remember my biology book when I took biology in college, and it was totally a secular. And our professor, I went to Christian school as well. Our professor had to clarify. And so I appreciated it. It wasn't tainted by it, but definitely heard a biblical worldview. Hey, you worked there, Chris, in the I hate to use the word secular world, but you worked in a context where the majority of people had an evolutionary perspective.
Yep.
How did you survive as a Christian? I know that's a long question, but just some pointers. Why should somebody major in it if they're going to be attacked every day? Yeah.
It's actually a simple question for me to answer. If we go back to what I said a minute ago with the textbooks, the evolution is forced into it. They just make up stories to make it fit what they see. They don't have any idea. So was I attacked? Never.
Huh.
Never heard a word about evolution in 30 years in the pharmaceutical, 30 plus years. Never heard a word about it. Huh. Why is that? It's not needed. It doesn't. It has no bearing on it at all. So that's not to say that other people might not encounter that, and certainly in the academic field you will. But I will give one example. I won't name this organization. Close to 15 years ago, I applied for a position as a professor at another Christian college, and I went through the interview process. And it was a good fit for me. But at the end, they brought out a piece of paper, and they said, "Well, you have to sign this to get a job here." And what it said was, I would teach according to the evolutionary perspective. Ooh. That was a Christian college, and I said, "Hey, I'm not the right person," So I walked away from that job. And so, as I mentioned before, there's only a very few true creation colleges out there. Unfortunately, a lot of Christian colleges are compromised. Certainly, all the secular colleges. It's a rough environment. So I think somebody coming that got a degree in STEM from us, we want them well prepared for the world, because when they go into graduate school, or if they took a position in academia, they would definitely encounter attacks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. I noticed in your bio, I'm shifting gears a little bit, that you're a reviewer, is what you say in your bio, for the Journal of Creation. Plus, you've also co-authored an article here in our latest IJOBA, our interdisciplinary journal on biblical authority, and you key an article there, and the title of your article was "A View of the Authoritative Superiority of the Scriptures Above the Sciences."
Yeah.
Co-author was somebody else. What were you saying in that article?
As we know, that the Bible is inerrant, right? It's the ultimate authority, our ultimate source of truth, and we can look at that and say there's lots of ways we can verify the Bible is true. And you said it, co-authored it. I did the science portion, of course, and so what I looked at science, and a lot of people look at science as an authority, and or the ultimate authority.
Right.
Science has done a lot of good things, and I'll pick on one thing very quickly. How many? I asked my students the other day, how many have ever known anybody that had polio? And nobody. When I was in grade school, I had a person in grade school who had polio. One of my professors and as an undergraduate had polio. Well, why is it that we don't have to deal with polio anymore? There was a vaccine created back in the 50s, and it essentially wiped it out. It's an incredible advance of science. We could name lots of other things, airplanes, computers, and so forth. So science God has given us this ability to understand, to study our world, to create. We're made in His image. So there's a lot of positive things about science. However, if you dig down, science is not perfect. It's not inerrant. And there are lots and lots of problems. So I'll pick on a few right here. And this is, I go into much more detail on that article. But there are many people don't realize necessarily that lots of articles that are published, I'm a scientist, I publish papers, a lot of them are retracted, meaning they were removed. They're later found to be wrong. Why is that? Because what they did was incorrect and later proven wrong. Even some of them were even fake data or fraud. One of the most well-known one is the one that had some correlation between autism and vaccines. Later proved to not be true at all, and there was these. Most of the authors they got into trouble, fraud, and so forth. So there's lots of things like that you can look at. There's drugs like thalidomide. You might be familiar with that. In the 50s, I believe, again, that caused a lot of birth defects. Fortunately, we didn't have that in America. It was for morning sickness. But there was a scientist at the FDA that stood up against it. So, but there's lots of, science is not perfect. There's lots of problems with it. And in fact, there's another article I referenced in there that talks about the fact that 70%, I believe, is the correct figure of scientists can't replicate another scientist's work. And 50% of scientists can't replicate their own work. and if you go out there and search the internet, you'll find out, search the words replication crisis. So this is a hot topic now, and these retractions, lots and lots of retractions of articles.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's very imperfect. It's good. God's given us this ability, and we create good things, but there's also, it's very imperfect, which is not surprising. We're all fallen human beings, right? So we're not perfect. So science is perfect.
You bet. We could go into a conversation on how Christians, back when science was developing, were involved there. But anyway, we're running out of time for our conversation here. Ways that people could get a hold of you. Email address. If someone's interested in the STEM program or just wants to dialogue about science, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So my email is chris.basel, my first name, last name, at calvary.edu. I do have an extension on campus. Is it 1390, I think? Yes. I don't ever call it. So
that's what I see. I call it. There you go.
So they can call me, they can email me. I'm, if they're around on campus, they can come by my office, and I'd love to chat with people.
Good. Well, that's great. Well, we're out of time today, but thanks, Professor Basel, for your conversation on a very timely matter. And we want to thank our listeners for joining us today for another Calvary Conversation.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's always a joy to talk about the biblical worldview of science.
You bet. You bet. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Calvary Conversations, a service of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. We invite you to participate in the conversation by contacting us through the Calvary University website, calvary.edu, or by calling us at 816-322-0110. Join us again next week for another Calvary Conversation.